you for joining us today for Hitting the Road, where we get to share the good stories that are going out there with Christ people. And this story is just a phenomenal one, and I'm so excited. Today's road trip is taking us up to Marshfield, Wisconsin at Christ Lutheran Church. And we're talking today with Kaylin Speth. And Kaylin is the volunteer church librarian who takes care of the church library. And I'll let Kaylin introduce herself on some things, but I first read Kaylin's story in the North Wisconsin District News newsletter. And it was called "A Library is Revitalized in Marshfield." And I started reading this story and I thought, this is such a great story. And it was Kaylin's COVID project. And so I reached out to Kaylin and we've gotten to know each other now. And I'm just so excited to welcome her to Hitting the Road and get this road trip up to Wisconsin. Kaylin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. So Kaylin, let's talk a little bit about this. How did you first get involved with your church library?
Well, I think it really started about 2 years ago. So early 2019 is when the library first kind of went on my radar. So I actually came across a Concordia Publishing House catalog and I was just casually looking through it. And what kind of struck me right away was just how many great titles there were and just how many things that I could learn more about. So I got really excited. I get excited about books anyway, but so I chose a couple that I wanted to learn more about, just ordered 6 or 7 of those and then donated those to the church library. So the Linda Toltzman was our church librarian for a couple decades, actually. So around this time last year, like February, she had been kind of thinking about stepping down. She was getting pretty busy, just didn't have the time to, work with it like she wanted to. So she was ready to hand over those keys to me. My sister actually works for Christ Lutheran here. She just asked me on the side, like, hey, would you be interested in taking over the library? Linda's ready to step down. So I'm like, oh yeah, sure. So took that on. Linda gave me everything I needed, all the stuff like checkout cards and we go by the Dewey Decimal System. So everything I needed for that, just very old fashioned, easy to use system, showed me where everything was. So I had all the materials I needed to get started. So just kind of made some goals to start out with. Some of the stuff I wanted to do right away, like we had a couple hundred books over the years. We have a really big nonfiction section. One of the first things I wanted to do was just kind of look through those shelf by shelf, just to see what was outdated, what people weren't checking out anymore and that no one would miss. Just put those off to the side and just clean it up. So that's what I did. And luckily for me, it was when COVID hit, I was laid off for 3 weeks. So now it was the same time all the shutdowns were happening. So I had, I didn't have to go to work. There was no church. There was nothing. So to fill my days, I had this new library project. So that kind of kept me busy, kept me sane during those kind of time of uncertainty. So that's what I got to work doing.
Well, how did that come about? When did you say, okay, this is really where I can go right now and do something?
Yeah, well, I think like when I was laid off and I had all this extra time, it really coincided well. So I had just placed another order to like CPH, some other sites. So I was really thinking about which books I wanted to get. So I placed an order there. Those came. I was really excited about those. I think I started off with maybe a dozen. So I got those processed, kind of started a new bookshelf just for those new books and started promoting those. All the old books that I had weeded out, I put on their own table as like a book sale. No one could see the book sale because no one was at church, but I figured eventually we'd be back as people could, if they wanted to book, they could go ahead and purchase that, and then those funds could be used to purchase more books in the future. So thought that was a good idea. And then yes, during that period too, another goal that I had was to spruce up our kids area. So we just had all of our kids books just on this old bookshelf. It wasn't really working that well for
Mhm.
kids books. Wanted to make it more colorful. So I also researched different kids bookshelves and I found two that would work really well. They were colorful. They had like the sleeves. Um, Everything could be displayed cover forward. So if you're walking by, you can see all the
Yeah.
titles really easily.
They were
So
the right height.
yeah, the right height for kids too. And I also made a bulletin board of Noah's Ark. I think I sent you a picture of that, or you can see it in an article too. Kind of what I did there, where I just had Noah's Ark. Went to the crafts supply store, got a bulletin board, and just that's another thing I worked on during those 3 weeks as well. Just getting that together, and so I was really happy with how it turned out. Just the space looked a lot more inviting. So hopefully, when kids are back in normal Sunday school, they're able to that catches their eye a little bit more.
Hmm. Well,
So.
tell me a little bit about Christ Lutheran. Share about Christ Lutheran.
Yep. So we're based in Marshfield, Wisconsin. We've got about 200 active members right now. We're pretty big. My pastor Andrew Belt, he's been here about 3 years. He came from seminary, and my sister is the kind of office manager slash ministry coordinator here as well. So this also is my home congregation. I was born and raised in Marshfield.
Oh,
So this has
wow.
been my church my whole 25 years of life. So yeah.
That's great. And just so everybody knows, you're not sitting in the library right now. Pastor Belt has lent you his office.
No, yep. Pastor I'm in his office because there's basketball practice right now. So
Yeah,
that's
originally we were going to try to do this in the library itself, but with basketball practice, we moved in the office. It's a good looking office. I like the books behind him.
yeah, me too. So it worked out well.
All right. So this is your home church. So this really has a personal meaning to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been tied here my whole life. I was baptized, confirmed here. My family always went to church here, so just we've been part of its history for a very long time. I think this year was actually my parents' 30th year of attending
Oh,
this church. So yeah, 3 decades of history. So my two older sisters as well were baptized and confirmed here. So
well, that's great. What I love about this story is lay people getting involved like this in their church and doing something that will help more people within the congregation. Um, and you just seem to have a heart for spreading the gospel through books and through other resources like this. Share with me, where did you learn your love of reading?
I think it really started at a young age. So, our mom always read us bedtime stories, of course. And once we were old enough to read, we just kind of carried it from there. Most of my older sisters were big readers. So I think naturally just kind of followed their example. I was always big into reading as a kid. We always devoured like Harry Potter and Magic Tree House
Mhm.
and all sorts of those series. So we never had or our parents never had a problem getting us to read as kids for sure. So and that really carried over to the rest of my life. I ended up when I went off to college. I was thinking about what I wanted to do. I ended up majoring in English because I love reading and I love writing so much.
Yeah, and you've written for one of the local papers, right?
Yep, I was there for a couple years. Now I'm in marketing at a new company, but yeah, I was able to get a job in my field after college, so that was nice.
Oh,
Um,
that's great. Now, the thing of it is, I guess, has your church now, do you have in-person worship still, or are you getting back to where you were beforehand?
yeah, we did. So to kind of give you some background on how things happened here. So in March, like mid-March, our governor restricted gatherings to 10 or less people. Um, so that's when everything shut down. We changed to live stream services. Luckily, we already had like a camera, but we had never done live streams. So we did
Mhm.
that for about 2.5 months. And then Pentecost Sunday, so May 31st last year was our first time actually physically gathering again. And we were, I think, one of the very first churches to do that actually, because I think everyone was eager to get back to normal, some sort of normal as soon as possible. And
Yep.
just that time apart made you realize how important it was to gather. So yeah, 2 months felt like a really long time, but now we're still going strong, still practicing, social distancing, still have those precautions in place. But it's been really nice to have that bit of normalcy again. So.
Mhm. Well, and I love too on your website, you write some of the blog. You provide a lot of updates on what's going on with the library as well in your blog and in some of your other writings. Have you been able to get a sense of how the updated library is being received by your members?
Yeah, a little bit. It probably isn't as busy as it could be since we aren't having as many like in-person activities.
Mhm.
Like our library is located by kind of our Sunday school wing, and um, so people going to church, unless they have a reason to go back there, they're not actually physically walking back there. I think the most what's been helpful is that our confirmation students have been doing like a book report on some of the new books. So that's been a way to kind of give some interest. There have been people like checking them out. So I have heard a little bit, I've seen the checkout cards go through, and so not as many as maybe if we were back to normal, but I'm hopeful that once Sunday school comes back and um, you know everything like our normal activities start returning a little bit, people just walk by and kind of catches their eye maybe that
Mhm.
um, a little, or it'll get a little bit more interest. So
Well, as the church librarian, what's your prayer for the library? What do you hope to achieve with having all these resources right there for your members?
yeah, I think my number one goal, like from the start, was just to get people interested in the books. I think for a long time, maybe people just walked by the books and didn't really pay attention to them. But I want them to kind of have the same spark that I did, like seeing that catalog for the first time and just how many books were available for to continue their education and just kind of get that love for theology that really sparked in me the last year. I never was interested in theology before. I'd gone through confirmation and then, I went to church and that was kind of it. But once I realized that there were books that could, I guess, like help my faith and teach me things that I really want to older people to have that same love and to that desire to, I guess, just learn more and dive deep, learn the basics again, get past the basics, just really, because there's so much to ponder in theology that I feel like even though I've been reading all these books, I still know a fraction of what I could know.
Mhm.
So I'm still going to be learning when I'm 90, hopefully. So,
Yeah, I don't think we ever stop learning. And I
no.
love that you just kind of got into the theology aspect of it. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but what were one or two of the books that really kind of sparked that interest for you?
Yeah, well, one of the books I really liked was The Unholy Trinity. That's probably still my favorite. I've read about a dozen so far, but that one, when read it, or when I read that one last year, I think before I had seen idolatry as like bowing down to like little statues or uh, like, oh, I'm not an adulterer, I don't bow down to statues. But then, like after I read the book, it just opened my mind to the real definition of idolatry, that anything we fear, love, or trust in is our God. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I kind of do that because I have things that I fear, love, and trust in more than God at times. So I really liked that book. Um, And let me see, I had some notes on that one too.
Well, I love too, as you talk in your blog post. I mean, you read these. I mean, you actually take the time to read them and kind of review them a little bit.
Yep, yep. And I think that was like when I started doing the blog post, like, well, I love to write anyway, but after I read the books, I really wanted to find ways to, I guess, educate the congregation that these resources were available, and also kind of share that love I was having for these books that and some of the things that I was learning. And it was a good way for me to review what I read as well. Um, so that was a way for me to advertise, I guess, the library and just keep it in people's minds that, hey, these books are available. And if one of them sparks, like, catches their interest, like, hey, it's available, you can just stop by the library and check it out, and it's yours for 2 months. And yeah.
Okay. As I travel around, I have seen different churches with libraries or resource centers or things like this. If you could help somebody or encourage somebody to start up their library, what would you say to them?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would say that a church library can be anything you want it to be. It doesn't have to be this big giant bookshelf. I mean, even if you had just 10 a dozen books just waiting for people that they could check out, that's perfectly fine too. You can definitely start out small and take it from there. Just, I think, a few good books to start out with. Books on life issues, books on stuff related to culture and kind of understanding what's going on in our culture. Uh, so yeah, you don't have to start big. You can just start small and have those resources. And I think the great thing about having those as well is that if someone comes to the pastor with a question, he can say like, oh, hey, if you have more questions about the resurrection, here's a book on that, or
Mhm.
here's I know that you're struggling with a loved one passing away, like, here's a book on grief that could help you. So just having books like that available would be super helpful for anyone in the congregation. Yeah, it doesn't have to be big.
Yeah, and I love too. I mean, you can even get these started with people, with members donating some of their old books
Mhm.
or donating for books as well, which I know you've done both.
Yeah, yeah, I did have some, like, when I was starting out with my pastor, he kind of looked through, his bookshelf and said like, "Hey, I don't need these anymore," or "Here's an extra copy that I have. Like, here's a couple." And one of our second pastor, he took a call to another congregation, and he used that as an opportunity to kind of leave behind a bunch of his books. So I got to look through those as well and see what might be good for our library.
Mhm. What type of books do you have? You have a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, really a lot of everything. I think at this point, um, so I started out with like a few dozen. So I think uh, by early June, I had like 36 books. And to me, that was a lot at the time. But then I, like, CPH had their warehouse sale, and I found some, at my local thrift store, and a few people donated them. So by the end of the year, I had like 178 books that I had gathered, like 70 arch books, and yeah, but yeah, 178 books and materials added to the library. So I don't know how that happened, but so we definitely have covered all of our basis. So I have books on, life issues, books on different religions, how to speak to, how to respond to someone of a different religion, historical figures, Lutheran education, lots of different Bible studies. So really, anything that um, someone wants to learn more about, they can definitely go to our church library and find it. And if they can't, they can talk to me, and I'm happy to find something for them. So one book that I was surprised the confirmation students were interested in, they liked the C.S. Lewis
Oh,
biography. So how he went from atheism to become a pretty big apologist and Christian. So
yeah, that's a good book as well. Now, one of the things, and I'm going to read it here because I want to make sure I get it right, but one of the things I loved in the article in the North Wisconsin District newsletter, you cite a Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote: "The physical presence of other Christian is a source of incomparable joy and strength to the believer." And we were talking in that article, you were talking about just the idea of getting back together and such. What are some of the reasons why that particular quote resonated with you?
Yeah. Well, I think it resonated a lot more after the shutdowns than it would have before because um like before the shutdowns you think like, oh yeah, like you kind of take it for granted that church is going to be here, and maybe I don't feel like going this Sunday, but it's definitely going to be there next Sunday. So I guess when the restrictions happened and we were suddenly shut down, it was just like mind blowing because you never thought that that would actually happen. So yeah, so during those like 2.5 months where we couldn't gather, and it was during Lent too, so that was really weird. And just we watched Easter services at home, and that's like my favorite Easter service. So that was hard to have to stay at home and watch that. But yeah, and just that final Sunday, like on Pentecost, when we actually could physically gather, albeit with restrictions, so things looked a little bit different. But it just kind of drove home, like, oh man, this feels so good to finally be back, and like, oh, there's someone I haven't seen in 2.5 months over there. So it's just you really can't replace, like, live services can never replace like just that physical gathering. Um, so it's such a relief to finally be back in church and have a degree of um, like things be back to normal for.
Yeah, some sense of normalcy. And I agree with you. I think there's just no comparison of all being back together and seeing
Mhm.
your church family and being able to get together that way. Well, let's go here. Let's talk about some of your favorite books. Now, you mentioned the Unholy Trinity, but what are some of the other favorite titles you've read recently?
Yeah, so I just finished Flowing from the Cross. That was the new one. I thought that was a really good back to basics look at just forgiveness and the grace of the gospel. So I really enjoyed that one. Um, a novel I actually liked was The Hammer of God. I
Hmm.
read that a couple months ago. That was really good, especially because it's broken down into three parts. Especially uh, part one was really good, just explaining. Uh, law and gospel, kind of the difference. There was a lot of good Lutheran theology in that novel, and it was really engaging reading. Um, yeah, another book I liked was the Bible study Waiting.
Okay.
Uh, I read that last summer while I was waiting for new new employment. So during that period when it's hard, just reading that and just having that comfort of things aren't really in your control, but God is in control, so you don't have to worry. So,
Now, there's something that at this stage, I got to say it. There's a lot of these books have companion videos teaching with them too on cphfaithcourses.com. So if you're not familiar with cphfaithcourses.com, you can go on there, and many of the books have free book video studies
oh,
that are usually different lengths, maybe 4 sessions, 6 sessions. And there's downloadable leader guide, downloadable student guide. So if you're not familiar with cphfaithcourses.com, I just want to put the plug out for that right now.
all right. Well, I'll have to check those
Yeah,
out.
because they go along with the book, and often they're the author of the book leading the study.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So what's next on your horizon? What's next with Kaylin? Where does she want to take this library, and where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, well, I'm probably not going to add 180 books this year, but slowing down a little bit on that. But I'm
That's a
definitely,
good goal to have, though.
yeah, right, right. But I'm keeping up on some of the new releases, and it's just kind of maybe branching out a little bit on what other books I could get in. Like right now, I'm reading Tortured for Christ. So that's not like a CPH book, but it's still really interesting to
Mhm.
read his story, and get that perspective of, even though we had lockdowns last year, at least we aren't being thrown in prison and tortured for our beliefs. So that's been kind of an eye-opening read for me. I think once I am done with that, I'll probably donate it to the library.
Mhm.
So I'm just keeping track of things in the library, and I started a young adult section actually.
Oh,
When I was weeding out all the books, if there was one that was more geared towards teens, I kind of put it aside, and it's just got its own little bookshelf right now. But I definitely want to keep growing that. I have the two graphic novels on there, the Katie Luther and the Martin Luther graphic novel in there. Thought one of those was checked out, and just want to keep growing that. I bought the new devotions for youth for that as
okay.
well. I was happy to see that as well.
That one?
Yep, that one. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
And then I saw too, you had the Messengers trilogy.
Yes, yep. I did have that one.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a good start on that. I definitely want to keep growing that and just have resources for everyone. We have a really good children's section, and um, I have a lot of adult books, so I just want to keep growing that kind of in between period. Just see what's out there for young adults that could help them grow in their faith as well.
Well, and I think these books are not just limited to the small kids. If somebody has grandchildren and their family's coming in town, they could rent the books or borrow the book and read them to their grandkids.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely. I mean, it's for all ages. So yeah.
Well, again, how can anybody support this, or how can they get in contact with you or get in contact with Christ Lutheran?
Yeah, I think a good way was probably the Facebook page. My sister is the one who monitors it. So if anyone has a message for me or wants to know more about how they can start their library or just book suggestions, I'm happy to help. They can message the church page, and I'm sure she'll pass that on. So
Well, that's great. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I wanted to connect you, who's done it, with others who may be thinking about something like this. Because I love this story. And it just, during the COVID time, this just made me smile and made many of us here smile to hear that someone takes the time to do this type of work within their church. So, Kaylin, thank you so much for your time with me. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
sure. Yeah, if anyone wants to start their library, I'm happy to help. And yeah, I love books, so I'm happy to share that love with anyone else who cares to start their own. So,
Oh, that's great. Now, before we go, I've got my lightning round questions for you.
oh wait, okay.
No pressure here.
All right,
All right. Favorite food?
spaghetti.
Spaghetti. Excellent. Last book read?
Connected to Christ, overcoming isolation through community.
How'd you like that?
Really liked it. Yeah.
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 Bible study book. So.
Yeah. I think, again, that is one of those timely books right now that is just fantastic. And
Yeah, for sure.
yep. Good. When you're not reading, what's your bingeable television?
The Walking Dead just started up again, so that was my COVID binge too.
Yep. Yep. I think we all have our secret COVID binges.
Yeah.
Favorite pastime?
Writing.
Writing?
Yep.
Do you get to write as much as you'd like?
Never. So.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then last one, Kayla, what's your favorite Christmas memory?
That's a tough one. Well, I always like going to our grandparents' house, and one year my grandpa gave us all coal.
Was it deserved, or was he being funny?
I think he was just being funny.
Oh.
Hard to tell.
All right. Well, again, Kaylin Speth, thank you for all that you're doing for Christ Lutheran Church and for helping spread the gospel through the different resources that you're providing, and just being the person who's taken it upon herself to help with this and introduce some of these resources to others. It really is appreciated. And it's one of those great stories of people who are doing things out there.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I love to do it. So.
All right. Well, Kaylin, thank you so much. And thank you all for watching this. We'll see you next time.